Okay, so we're gonna make a little video on this car because the last video I made, I think, was at the beginning of spring, and I had just gotten the car going, just driving around and, you know, checking for leaks and stuff like that. But done a little work to it since then, and it's been fun all summer long. This car is performed. So, I mean, a lot of you guys know me for the Z31, which is just collecting dust there. That's fine. I'll get back to that one later when I get bored. But this one, though, the goal was to just get it in the 8s. And I did that essentially right off the bat when I took it out to the track. So I ran an 899 or even an 8999, I think, just barely got into the 8s. But the cool thing about that was I had a safety feature set up on the ECU to where if it saw over X amount of PSI boost, I can't remember what it was right now, but it would basically cut the ignition because it knew, oh, that's too much. Well, I had forgotten to raise that PSI, or that safety feature, so it cut back to wastegate spring pressure, which was like 7 pounds or 6 pounds of boost, and that was at the 8th mile. So it finished out the quarter mile under just regular wastegate boost and not higher boost like it was supposed to. So I knew the car had more in it. I just hadn't figured out what the problem was yet. Got home, figured out that I had that safety feature set up incorrectly, raised it, and went out again.
Hell yeah!
So at that point, you could see at the end of the video that you could see smoke coming off the back of the car at the end of that video. And what was happening was the slicks were expanding so much that the fender was cutting into the tire at 168 miles an hour, 167 miles an hour. That's obviously not good. I didn't want to blow a tire up doing 170 and kill myself. So, and everyone was telling me, oh, look at the way the car plants the tire. You need to run a radial. You got to switch to a radial. So I did. I bought a set of radials, and that's when stuff just started going south for me. So I would run the car, and probably 20% of the time, the car would hook and go and do what it was supposed to do. The other 80% of the time, I would just spin. I would spin the tires all the time on a radial. And people love radials. They get them to work great. For me, it just does not work. I don't know why, but I've tried them on both the Z and the RX7. Completely different suspension setups. This one's a multi-link IRS, and this one's a solid axle. So completely different, but for whatever reason, neither car likes the radial. So I was back fighting, trying to keep the things in the 8s just because I couldn't get traction. So that was a Tesla Plaid that I raced in that video, and normally I would destroy those things. But you can see in the video, I just don't have traction. You can hear it. I'm spinning the tires for, I don't know, too much. And I had to try and reel them in on the top end. But, I'm at a loss at this point. Like, what do I do? Okay, well, let's try and add some weight to the back end. So I grabbed sand and I put 200 pounds in the back of the car, and I tried that. that doesn't work. It just spins like crazy. And I can't remember if the Tesla video, if I had already done the gears, but I decided I was already going through the traps on the rev limiter. So I was wrapping the car out as far as it could go and running out of gear. So I decided to put 355s in there instead of the 410s that were in it. That helped. I mean, but that it still spun like all the time. And I decided, well, I'm just going to have to go back to a slick, and I'll just have to trim the fenders to where it's not cutting into the tire anymore. So I did. I went back to the slick, went out again, and the results were right where they were supposed to be. The car was doing exactly what it was supposed to be doing again. So 8.2 is what we hit, which is cool. Now we're making power, but now we're popping wheelies. Now we're pulling the front end off the ground. So the slicks are doing what they're supposed to do. You guys can have your radials. That's fine. You get them to work great, sweet. I don't know how to tune suspension, whatever. I don't care. I'm sticking with what works for me. So slicks it is. Now we're popping wheelies. That's pretty sweet. Down to an 8.2. All right, we're getting somewhere. So I decided to go home, look over the tune, and I had looked at the plugs, and I was like, you know what, it could use more timing. Let's throw some more timing at it. So that's what I did. Threw some more timing at it and went out again. So now I'm down to an 8.1. You can see in the video it's at 8.17. The time slip actually said 8.15. But the problem is, if you notice in the video, I have oil that's spraying up on the windshield on the passenger side. That's how my catch can was set up. I had the outlets back here. So G-forces were causing oil was pooling up in the heads. G-forces were causing it to rush back to the back of the head, and it was blowing out from there into the catch can. Regardless, I had to redesign that, and engine's fine. It's just that was an issue. But then I get online, and I'm talking to people about reading spark plugs, and people got in my head, and they're like, oh, you need to be running colder plugs. You need to run colder plugs. I was like, all right, fine. So I went and got some colder spark plugs, put them in there, and actually upped the nitrous a little bit. Went out and tried to run again, and the results weren't so great. So you can see in the video, I mean, the car wheelies like a monster now. It's got tons of power, but the ECU was cutting out. What was happening is when I looked at a data log, my data log said that I was ramping up to 20 pounds of boost over about the course of a second, which is normal. And then in the matter of 0.04 seconds, it dropped from 20 pounds of boost down to 6 pounds of boost, and then up to 58 pounds of boost. This is within 0.04 seconds. That is physically impossible for those turbos to do that. So something was going on, and I didn't know what it was. Well, I got home, and I thought it was the map sensor, but then I thought about it. I was like, wait a minute, I switched those plugs to the non-resistor plugs. Well, when you run a non-resistor plug, it can send an RFI signal, or a radio frequency interference signal, to the ECU, wreaking havoc on some of your sensors. I was like, well, let's switch it back out to the regular plugs you were running, which in my opinion seemed fine anyways. So I let people get in my head, and they had me switch plugs, and shouldn't have done that. But So I put the regular plugs back in, went out, ran great. No more issues. The only problem is that was the last track day of the year. So I didn't get another opportunity to run to get the car into the 7s. So now it's going to have to be next year. But I really think the car's got it. I mean, it went the best of 8,150 and the best trap speed was 172.5. So it's definitely making enough power to get it into the 7s. It's just going to be a next year thing. Maybe this year or this off season, I'll spend some time cleaning up some wiring and I don't know, maybe clean this pigsty of a garage because it's a disaster right now. But that's where we're sitting right now. The car is it's a beast, and it just keeps taking a beating all season long. Love my LS motors.